This is The Evening Buzz, presented by Mikhail Atiyah.
It's been 3 years since HBO released Game of Thrones Season 8, the finale itself that left a bad taste in most of fans of the series. I remember being there, and I recall 3 years ago I reviewed it here on Pulse 95 Radio, episode by episode, until we got to the finale. And I remember with every episode, I just became more contempt against the series itself. I became disappointed, upset. I was breaking down all the problems that series had, from character choices and motivations to just absurd plot directions. And then that ending happened, and pretty crazy. And it's pretty crazy that 3 years has already passed, and here's HBO once again with a new series from the world of Game of Thrones, but this time it's a prequel. This is House of the Dragon, so to speak, and this takes place roughly around 170 years before the events of Game of Thrones, and it's set in Westeros once again, a very familiar place if you've watched the series, but this time around, Westeros is ruled by the crowning House of Targaryen. And this is probably the most interesting aspect about this prequel, is where Game of Thrones probably had like 2 to 3 Targaryen characters. This time around, we're seeing an entire family of them. And that is probably where the show really shines. So I want to give a special thanks to OSN Plus for inviting me to watch the episode 1 premiere for House of the Dragon. They held one earlier this week on 16th of August. They did a whole sort of like augmented reality theme of House of the Dragon, and it was a really nice experience. And then sitting down there and watching it for the first time, I remembered why I love Game of Thrones, and it's more than just the visuals and the over-the-top political dialogue that usually comes with it, but its world building is always what fascinated me. The moving parts, almost like a chess piece for every kingdom and every house, power hungry and looking to sort of claim their conquest against one another, the betrayals, the blood that must be spilt to achieve those types of victories. And with House of the Dragon, being there again in this very familiar place. Well, most of the episode starts off in King's Landing, and I won't give too many spoilers here. I'm going to keep it spoiler free. What I found interesting is that even though that's a familiar place, a lot of the known architecture, especially the main palace of King's Landing, is very different. And this time around, you got more dragons sort of roaming around in that area, which is definitely refreshing look and feel to this series. But this, like I said, where Game of Thrones is about the rivalry between different houses like the Baratheons, the Starks. Game of Thrones is all about that sort of rivalry. Here, we are looking at the rivalry and tension and the politics between members of the Targaryen family, where we're only, even in the first episode, we've only been introduced to a few of them. So we have King Aegon, who is basically from a line of kings who have managed to instill peace in Westeros, but is desperate to find his next heir as his wife struggles to give birth to a new child, a potential son to continue the reign. However, we also have his ambitious brother, Daemon Targaryen, who is a little bit reckless, stubborn, and you can tell he's someone who's going to bring in a lot of trouble in the next coming episodes. And this is the biggest difference that I love about this series, is the tension between kin, between family members. And I know just from the get-go, this is going to get a lot more complex than we could expect. And it's going to be very intimate. And it's going to be very domestic in that sort of political sense. And I won't say too much about what I've seen in terms of the moving parts of the story, but I will say that there is there is this troubling feeling in the air that things are gonna go wrong real quick, and it specifically has to do with the tension in the family Targaryen. This time around, I'd say that everything you can expect in terms of visual effects, in terms of atmosphere, world building, is all there. Probably better if you compare it to the first season of Game of Thrones to what you're seeing in House of the Dragon. There's a lot of tremendous improvement on that aspect, and do expect to see a lot more dragons. But this time around, I've noticed that every dragon that they showcase in this episode is an extension of a character, that it resembles their personality or their characteristics. These dragons even have names, so you better start remembering them. I'm struggling to remember the name of the characters because they can be a little bit jarring to keep in track. But I know throughout the episodes I'll be very familiar with every moving piece of the story, every moving character, and how they impact and influence one another. And speaking of the Iron Throne, we see it once again, but there's a certain different design to it where you have your Iron Throne that you're familiar with the series, but then there's all these like swords that are kind of like protruding all over the throne. And I think that's a really nice touch. Will be appreciated by the fans because if you compare it to the description based on the book, the Iron Throne is supposed to be humongous. It would have looked completely distorted and very uncomfortable to sit on, but it has this like a very intimidating presence whenever you approach the throne. And I feel they've tried to do this, this sort of improvement to the look and design of the Iron Throne. It looks definitely a little bit better this time around. And honestly, first episode is not enough to say that what's to come is going to be amazing, but I say the setup is enough to expect something that everyone I know fans of Game of Thrones love, which is a climactic travesty of some kind. And I know it's going to be the doing and undoing of the Targaryen family. This bloodline is thick and ripe for all sorts of bad news, and everybody who's watched Game of Thrones is definitely going to be excited to see how that pans out. And that is my review for the House of the Dragon episode 1. Of course, again, I kept it spoiler free, and honestly, it's going to be a while before I can say that I love this series because this is only the first episode and there's more to come. Would I recommend you watch it? I would say fans of Game of Thrones, just manage your expectations as you jump into it, because a lot of us have sort of become skeptical about Game of Thrones and what happened during that ending. So us revisiting Westeros is partly nostalgic, but also we have that part of us that is just a little bit worried and concerned as to how they're going to pull this off and if the execution is going to come off right this time around. So yeah, let's take a short break, and coming up next, we'll be talking about Elden Ring, as it has finally reached 16 million copies sold worldwide, and that is a milestone worth celebrating. So let's take a short break, and I'll talk more about it right here on the Evening Buzz.